We're starting the tractate of Batra. And normally, when we start a new tractate, we begin by examining all of the psukim, all of the verses that underlie it. And what is striking about the beginning of Bava Batra is that we're not learning, we're not using any new verses. And it seems almost as if we're not learning any new concepts. The subject matter, the question of the wall in between two neighboring properties. And by the way, what happens if it falls down? And who owns the space and the building materials is an exact follow-on from the end of Bava Metzia, which we just completed. And indeed, we're reminded very forcefully when we cross over this transition that these three tractates, the first gate, the middle gate, the last gate, Bava Kama, Bava Metzia, Bava Batra, these three tractates were originally one tractate of 30 chapters. And maybe for reasons of practicality, the sages split them down into three equal groups of 10 chapters each. So it's one tractate, really. And so we're going to pick up the question of these neighbors who have these neighbors and how we're going to regulate their relationship. So we've got two partners who want to make a partition in a courtyard. So they want to make a partition. And the Gemara explains that if the courtyard is bigger than a certain size, in fact, one of them can demand a partition. But below a certain size, the two partners, if they want to split the courtyard into two, they have to agree to split it, i.e., they turn this small part of kind of shared space into two private spaces. So they're going to turn it into two private spaces, and they're going to build a wall in the middle. Bonim et hakotel be'emtza. And once they've agreed to turn it into two private spaces, well, we're going to learn that one can actually oblige the other to share the cost of building the wall. Now, the construction of the wall is going to be whatever, it's just going to vary by local custom. Makom shenahagu livnot gazit, kfesim, levenim, bonim hakol, ke minhag ha-medina. In a place where the custom is to build of gazil, that's unshaped stones, of gazit, that's nicely chopped stones. Kfesim, we've seen these before in the tractate of Eruvim. Kfesim are half bricks, and the Romans used to use these. Levenim, they're full bricks. What all these kinds of building materials, bonim hakol kaminhag ha-medina. We're going to build everything according to local custom, and we've seen this concept before. So, well, the amount of space, therefore, in the middle of the courtyard that each partner has to give up is going to depend on the building materials. So let's keep going. But gavil ze noten shlosha tfachim veze noten shlosha tfachim. So if we're going to build of unshaped stones, that's a bit like a dry stone wall in Yorkshire. Stones without any cement, just regular stones taken from the fields but laid together to make a wall. And these are pretty broad walls. One party gives up 3 hand breadths. That must be about nearly 18 inches. Nearly a foot, certainly a foot. Veze noten shlosha tfachim, and the other gives 3 hands breadths. This is quite a wide wall. It's 6 tfachim. It's 6 tefachim wide. That's about 20 to 24 inches. 6 tefachim. If the stones are hewn, if they're shaped stones, it can be a bit smaller. Uvagazit zenoten tipraim umachza, veze noten tipraim umachza. If they're hewn stones, each one gives up 2.5 hands breadths, 2.5 tefachim. Uva kfesim, with half bricks. Ze notenti prime. And now we have a hole in the Kaufman manuscript. With half bricks, one gives up 2 handbreadths, and there's a gap in the Kaufman manuscript. But we assume, like most of the other manuscripts of the Mishnah, it says vize notenti prime. The other person also gives 2.5 handsbreadths. So I'm interpolating that in. Uvat levenim, and if they're made with regular bricks, this is the neatest way of building a wall. With real bricks, one gives 1.5 handbreadths, and the other gives 1.5 handsbreadths. And so we have a wall made of 3 tefachim, which will be about 9.5 inches. And that means, by the way, if they've each contributed equal to the wall, lefichach im nafal hakotzel hamakom ve'avanim shel shnehem. Therefore, if the wall fell down, the space and the stones belong to both of them. So we've been dealing until now with, for example, a wall in one person's garden that falls into another person's garden. And who's responsible for the stones? It's clear here that the stones and the space are common property. If the wall falls down, then they are both responsible for it and they both own the building materials. Now, we might ask, well, on what basis, just because they've agreed to divide this courtyard, why should one of the householders have the right to oblige the other one to build a shared wall? And the Gemara introduces at this point the idea of hezek ri'ah, damage caused by sight. And we would call this, I guess, an invasion of privacy or an invasion of privacy today. So the Gemara asks, well, what is this mechitza? And we have a verse from Bamidbar about dividing up booty after a battle. But the Gemara goes on to explain, since they agreed to divide up the courtyard, bonin et hakotel bal korchan. One of them can force the other one to build the wall, and therefore we know that damage caused by sight, hezek re'iyah shmei hezek, damage caused by sight is called damage. So we've seen all kinds of civil damages in the course of the tractate. Here we're seeing an invasion of privacy. The Gemara around this point brings the example of someone who's standing on his flat roof and he's looking down into the courtyard of his neighbor. Maybe someone wants, to do things in his courtyard that he doesn't want his neighbor to see. And we'll learn in the following Mishnayot that the division has to be 4 amot high, which is about 2 meters, about 6 feet. In other words, it's got to be high enough not to see over. And that's to protect the privacy of the inhabitants rather than their physical security. And I think it's striking and interesting that the Mishnah already 2,000 years ago has got some sort of concept of information privacy and the right to privacy, just as we debate with our theorists today. And then the Mishnah goes on, and now this is the clear link to the end of the previous tractate. V'chein ba gina, same with the garden. Makom shenagu ligdor m'chayavim oto. Where the custom is to build a fence, they can oblige him to do so. Again, there's a hole in Kaufman here. Aval babika makom shenagu shelo ligdor ein m'chayavim oto. But in a valley, apparently in the valley, it's not customary to build a fence. Ein m'chayavim oto. So we don't oblige him. Eila im ratza. If he wants, he can build the wall on his property. And he can put some kind of finishing on the outside of the wall to indicate that it's his property. So again, everything goes according to the custom of the land. And the Mishnah continues, Lefichach, im nafal hakotel. So if the wall falls, that is exactly the situation we learnt about in the end of the previous tractate. The wall has fallen down from one garden into another garden. If the wall falls, hamakom v'havanim shelo, the place and the stones belong to him. In other words, he has to clean up. If they acted with each other's consent, if they both agreed to build the wall, so they build the wall in the middle. They put a finishing place on both sides. So if the wall falls down, if the wall between the two gardens falls down, the place, the space, and the stones belong to them both. They have joint responsibility for clearing away the rubble or for ownership of the building materials. They're jointly responsible. And as the tractate of Batra continues, we'll see more and more situations where we're dealing with joint responsibility. So whereas until now we've dealt with damages and we've dealt with contracts between two individuals about their property, as the tractate of Batra continues, we'll see more and more situations where we deal with joint property.